Book 5. St. Augustine's 29th year. Faustus, a snare of Satan to many, made an instrument of deliverance to St. Augustine, by showing the ignorance of the Manichees on those things wherein they profess to have divine knowledge. Augustine gives up all thought of going further among the Manichees, is guided to Rome and Milan, where he hears St. Ambrose, leaves the Manichees, and becomes again a catechumen in the Church Catholic. Chapter 1. Accept the sacrifice of my confessions from the ministry of my tongue, which thou hast formed and stirred up to confess unto thy name. Heal thou all my bones, and let them say, O Lord, who is like unto thee? For he who confesses to thee doth not teach thee what takes place within him, seeing a closed heart closes not out thy eye, nor can man's hard-heartedness thrust back thy hand. For thou dissolvest it all at thy will in pity or in vengeance, and nothing can hide itself from thy heat. But let my soul praise thee, that it may love thee, and let it confess thy own mercies to thee, that it may praise thee. Thy whole creation ceaseth not, nor is silent in thy praises, neither the spirit of man, with voice directed unto thee, nor creation animate or inanimate, by the voice of those who meditate thereon, that so our souls may from their weariness arise towards thee, leaning on those things which thou hast created, and passing on to thyself, who madest them wonderfully, and there is refreshment and true strength. Chapter 2. Let the restless, the godless, depart and flee from thee, yet thou seest them, and dividest the darkness. And behold, the universe with them is fair, though they are foul. And how have they injured thee? Or how have they disgraced thy government, which from the heaven to this lowest earth is just and perfect? For whither fled they, when they fled from thy presence? Or where dost not thou find them? But they fled, that they might not see thee seeing them, and, blinded, might stumble against thee, because thou forsakest nothing thou hast made. That the unjust, I say, might stumble upon thee, and justly be hurt, withdrawing themselves from thy goodness, and stumbling at thy uprightness, and falling upon their own ruggedness. Ignorant, in truth, that thou art everywhere, whom no place encompasseth. And thou alone art near, even to those that remove far from thee. Let them then be turned and seek thee, because not as they have forsaken their Creator hast thou forsaken thy creation. Let them be turned and seek thee, and behold, thou art there in their heart, in the heart of those that confess to thee, and cast themselves upon thee, and weep in thy bosom, after all their rugged ways. Then dost thou gently wipe away their tears, and they weep the more, and joy in weeping, even for that thou, Lord, not man of flesh and blood, but thou, Lord, who madest them, and remakest and comfortest them. But where was I when I was seeking thee? And thou wert before me, but I had gone away from thee, nor did I find myself, how much less thee. Chapter 3. I would lay open before my God that 29 year of mine age. There had then come to Carthage a certain bishop of the Manichees, Faustus by name, a great snare of the devil, and many were entangled by him through that lure of his smooth language, which though I did commend, yet could I separate from the truth of the things which I was earnest to learn. Nor did I so much regard the service of oratory as the science which this Faustus, so praised among them, set before me to feed upon. Fame had before bespoken him most knowing in all valuable learning, and exquisitely skilled in the liberal sciences. And since I had read and well remembered much of the philosophers, I compared some things of theirs with those long fables of the Manichees, and found the former the more probable, even although they could only prevail so far as to make judgment of this lower world, the Lord of it they could by no means find out. For thou art great, O Lord, and hast respect unto the humble, but the proud thou holdest afar off. Nor dost thou draw near, but to the contrite in heart, nor art found by the proud. No, not though by curious skill they could number the stars and the sand, and measure the starry heavens, and track the courses of the planets. For with their understanding and wit, which thou bestowest on them, they search out these things, and much have they found out, and foretold many years before, eclipses of those luminaries, the sun and moon, what day and hour, and how many digits. Nor did their calculation fail. And it came to pass as they foretold, and they wrote down the rules they had found out, and these are read at this day, and out of them do others foretell in what year and month of the year, and what day of the month, and what hour of the day, and what part of its light, moon or sun, is to be eclipsed. And so it shall be, as it is foreshowed. At these things men, that know not this art, marvel and are astonished, and they that know it, exult and are puffed up. And by an ungodly pride departing from thee, and failing of thy light, they foresee a failure of the sun's light, which shall be so long before, but see not their own, which is. For they search not religiously whence they have the wit, wherewith they search this out. And finding that thou madest them, they give not themselves up to thee, to preserve what thou madest, nor sacrifice to thee what they have made themselves, nor slay their own soaring imaginations, as fowls of the air, nor their own diving curiosities, wherewith, like the fishes of the sea, they wander over the unknown paths of the abyss, nor their own luxuriousness, as beasts of the field, that thou, Lord, a consuming fire, mayest burn up those dead cares of theirs, and recreate themselves immortally. But they know not the way, thy word, by whom thou madest these things which they number, and themselves who number, and the sense whereby they perceive what they number, and the understanding out of which they number, or that of thy wisdom there is no number. But the only begotten is himself made unto us wisdom, and righteousness, and sanctification, and was numbered among us, and paid tribute unto Caesar. They knew not this way, whereby to descend to him from themselves, and by him ascend unto him. They knew not this way, and deemed themselves exalted amongst the stars and shining. And behold, they fell upon the earth, and their foolish heart was darkened. They discourse many things truly concerning the creature, but truth, artificer of the creature, they seek not piously, and therefore find him not. Or if they find him, knowing him to be God, they glorify him not as God, neither are thankful, but become vain in their imaginations, and profess themselves to be wise, attributing to themselves what is thine, and thereby, with most perverse blindness, study to impute to thee what is their own, forging ties of thee who art the truth, and changing the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things, changing thy truth into a lie, and worshipping and serving the creatures more than the Creator. Yet many truths concerning the creature retained I from these men, and saw the reason thereof from calculations, the succession of times, and the visible testimonies of the stars, and compared them with the sayings of Manichaeus, which in his frenzy he had written most largely on these subjects, but discovered not any account of the solstices, or equinoxes, or the eclipses of the greater lights, nor whatever of this sort I had learned in the books of secular philosophy. But I was commanded to believe, and yet it corresponded not with what had been established by calculations and my own sight, but was quite contrary. Doth then, O Lord God of truth, whoso knoweth these things, therefore please thee? Surely unhappy is he who knoweth all these, and knoweth not thee. But happy whoso knoweth thee, though he know not these. And whoso knoweth both thee and them, is not the happier for them, but for thee only, if knowing thee, he glorifies thee as God, and is thankful, and becomes not vain in his imaginations. For as he is better off, who knows how to possess a tree, and returns thanks to thee for the use thereof, although he know not how many cubits high it is, or how wide it spreads, than he that can measure it, and count all its boughs, and neither owns it, nor knows the love of its Creator. So a believer, whose all this world of wealth is, and who having nothing, yet possesseth all things, by cleaving unto Thee, whom all things serve, though he know not even the circles of the Great Bear, yet it is folly to doubt but he is in a better state than one who can measure the heavens, and number the stars, and poise the elements, yet neglecteth Thee, who hast made all things in number, weight, and measure. Chapter 5. But yet who bade that Manichaeus write on these things also, skill in which was no element of piety? For thou hast said to man, Behold, piety and wisdom, of which he might be ignorant, though he had perfect knowledge of these things. But these things, since, knowing not, he most impudently dared to teach, he plainly could have no knowledge of piety. For it is vanity to make professions of these worldly things, even when known, but confession to Thee is piety. Wherefore this wanderer to this end spake much of these things, that convicted by those who had truly learned them, it might be manifest what understanding he had in the other abstruser things. For he would not have himself meanly thought of, but went about to persuade men, that the Holy Ghost, the Comforter, the Enricher of Thy faithful ones, was with plenary authority personally with him. When then he was found out to have taught falsely of the heaven and stars, and of the motions of the sun and moon, although these things pertain not to the doctrine of religion, yet his sacrilegious presumption would become evident enough, seeing he delivered things which not only he knew not, but which were falsified, with so mad a vanity of pride, that he sought to ascribe them to himself, as to a divine person. For when I hear any Christian brother ignorant of these things, and mistaken of them, I can patiently behold such a man holding his opinion, nor do I see that any ignorance as to the position or character of the corporal creation can injure him, so long as he doth not believe anything unworthy of Thee, O Lord, the Creator of all. But it doth injure him, if he imagine it to pertain to the form of the doctrine of piety, and will yet affirm that too stiffly whereof he is ignorant. And yet is even such an infirmity, in the infancy of faith, borne by our mother Charity, till the newborn may grow up into a perfect man, so as not to be carried about with every wind of doctrine. But in him, who in such wise presumed to be the teacher, source, guide, chief of all whom he could so persuade, that whoso followed him, thought that he followed not a mere man, but Thy Holy Spirit, who would not judge that so great madness, when once convicted of having taught anything false, were to be detested and utterly rejected. But I had not as yet clearly ascertained whether the vicissitudes of longer and shorter days and nights, and of day and night itself, with the eclipses of the greater lights, and whatever else of the kind I had read of in other books, might be explained consistently with his sayings, so that, if they by any means might, it should still remain a question to me whether it were so or no, that I might, on account of his reputed sanctity, rest my credence upon his authority. Chapter 6. And for almost all these 9 years, wherein with unsettled mind I had been their disciple, I had longed but too intensely for the coming of this Faustus. For the rest of the sect, whom by chance I had lighted upon, were unable to solve my objections about these things, still held out to me the coming of this Faustus, by conference with whom these and greater difficulties, if I had them, were to be most readily and abundantly cleared. When then he came, I found him a man of pleasing discourse, and who could speak fluently and in better terms, yet still but the selfsame things which they were wont to say. But what availed the utmost neatness of the cupbearer to my thirst for a more precious draught? Mine ears were already cloyed with the like, nor did they seem to me therefore better, because better said, nor therefore true, because eloquent, nor the soul therefore wise, because the face was comely, and the language graceful. But they who held him out to me were no good judges of things, and therefore to them he appeared understanding and wise, because in words pleasing. I felt, however, that another sort of people were suspicious even of truth, and refused to assent to it, if delivered in a smooth and copious discourse. But thou, O my God, hadst already taught me by wonderful and secret ways, and therefore I believe that thou taughtest me, because it is truth, nor is there besides thee any teacher of truth, where or whencesoever it may shine upon us. Of thyself therefore had I now learned, that neither ought anything to seem to be spoken truly, because eloquently, nor therefore falsely, because the utterance of the lips is inharmonious, nor again therefore true, because rudely delivered, nor therefore false, because the language is rich, but that wisdom and folly are as wholesome and unwholesome food, and adorned or unadorned phrases, as courtly or country vessels. Either kind of meats may be served up in either kind of dishes. That greediness then, wherewith I had of so long time expected that man, was delighted verily with his action and feeling when disputing, and his choice and readiness of words to clothe his ideas. I was then delighted, and, with many others and more than they, did I praise and extol him. It troubled me, however, that in the assembly of his auditors I was not allowed to put in and communicate those questions that troubled me in familiar converse with him, which when I might, and with my friends began to engage his ears at such times as it was not unbecoming for him to discuss with me, and had brought forward such things as moved me. I found him first utterly ignorant of liberal sciences, save grammar, and that but in an ordinary way. But because he had read some of Tully's orations, a very few books of Seneca, some things of the poets, and such few volumes of his own sect, as were written in Latin and neatly, and was daily practised in speaking, he acquired a certain eloquence, which proved the more pleasing and seductive, because under the guidance of a good wit, and with a kind of natural gracefulness. Is it not thus, as I recall it, O Lord my God, thou judge of my conscience? Before thee is my heart, and my remembrance, who didst at that time direct me by the hidden mystery of thy providence, and didst set those shameful errors of mine before my face, that I might see and hate them. Chapter 7. For after it was clear that he was ignorant of those arts in which I thought he excelled, I began to despair of his opening and solving the difficulties which perplexed me, of which indeed, however ignorant, he might have held the truths in piety, had he not been a Manichee. For their books are fraught with prolix fables of the heaven and stars, sun and moon, and I now no longer thought him able satisfactorily to decide what I much desired, whether, on comparison of these things with the calculations I had elsewhere read, the account given in the books of Manichaeus were preferable, or at least as good. Which when I proposed to be considered and discussed, he, so far modestly, shrunk from the burden. For he knew that he knew not these things, and was not ashamed to confess it. For he was not one of those talking persons, many of whom I had endured, who undertook to teach me these things, and said nothing. But this man had a heart, though not right towards thee, yet neither altogether treacherous to himself. For he was not altogether ignorant of his own ignorance, nor would he rashly be entangled in a dispute, whence he could neither retreat nor extricate himself fairly. Even for this I liked him the better, for fairer is the modesty of a candid mind, than the knowledge of those things which I desired. And such I found him, in all the more difficult and subtle questions. My zeal for the writings of Manichaeus being thus blunted, and despairing yet more of their other teachers, seeing that in divers things which perplexed me, he, so renowned among them, had so turned out, I began to engage with him in the study of that literature, on which he also was much set, and which as a rhetoric reader I was at that time teaching young students at Carthage, and to read with him, either what himself desired to hear, or such as I judged fit for his genius. But all my efforts whereby I had purposed to advance in that sect, upon knowledge of that man, came utterly to an end. Not that I detached myself from them altogether, but as one finding nothing better, I had settled to be content meanwhile with what I had in whatever way fallen upon, unless by chance something more eligible should dawn on me. Thus that Faustus, to so many a snare of death, had now, neither willing nor witting it, begun to loosen that wherein I was taken. For thy hands, O God, in the secret purpose of thy providence, did not forsake my soul, and out of my mother's heart's blood, through her tears night and day poured out, was a sacrifice offered for me unto thee, and thou didst deal with me by wondrous ways. Thou didst it, O my God, for the steps of a man are ordered by the Lord, and he shall dispose his way. Or how shall we obtain salvation, but from thy hand, remaking what it made? Chapter 8. Thou didst deal with me, that I should be persuaded to go to Rome, and to teach there rather what I was teaching at Carthage. And how I was persuaded to this I will not neglect to confess to thee, because herein also the deepest recesses of thy wisdom, and thy most present mercy to us, must be considered and confessed. I did not wish therefore to go to Rome, because higher gains and higher dignities were warranted me by my friends who persuaded me to this, though even these things had at that time an influence over my mind. But my chief and almost only reason was, that I heard that young men studied there more peacefully, and were kept quiet under a restraint of more regular discipline, so that they did not, as their pleasures, petulantly rush into the school of one, whose pupils they were not, nor were even admitted without his permission. Whereas at Carthage there reigns among the scholars a most disgraceful and unruly license. They burst in audaciously, and with gestures almost frantic, disturb all order which any one hath established for the good of his scholars. Divers outrages they commit, with a wonderful stolidity, punishable by law, did not custom uphold them. That custom evincing them to be the more miserable, in that they now do as lawful, what by thy eternal law shall never be lawful. And they think they do it unpunished, whereas they are punished, with the very blindness whereby they do it, and suffer incomparably worse than what they do. The manners then which, when a student, I would not make my own, I was fain as a teacher to endure in others, and so I was well pleased to go where all that knew it assured me that the like was not done. But thou, my refuge and my portion in the land of the living, that I might change my earthly dwelling for the salvation of my soul, at Carthage didst goad me, that I might thereby be torn from it, and at Rome didst proffer me allurements whereby I might be drawn thither, by men in love with a dying life, the one doing frantic, the other promising vain things. And, to correct my steps, didst secretly use their and my own perverseness. For both they who disturbed my quiet were blinded with a disgraceful frenzy, and they who invited me elsewhere savoured of earth, and I, who here detested real misery, was there seeking unreal happiness. But why I went hence, and went thither, thou knowest, O God, yet showedst it neither to me nor to my mother, who grievously bewailed my journey, and followed me as far as the sea. But I deceived her, holding me by force, that either she might keep me back, or go with me, and I feigned that I had a friend whom I could not leave, till he had a fair wind to sail. And I lied to my mother, and such a mother, and escaped. For this also hast thou mercifully forgiven me, preserving me, thus full of execrable defilements, from the waters of the sea, for the water of thy grace, whereby when I was cleansed, the streams of my mother's eyes should be dried, with which for me she daily watered the ground under her face. And yet refusing to return without me, I scarcely persuaded her to stay that night in a place hard by our ship, where was an oratory in memory of the blessed Cyprian. That night I privily departed, but she was not behind in weeping and prayer. And what, O Lord, was she with so many tears asking of thee, but that thou wouldst not suffer me to sail? But thou, in the depths of thy counsels and hearing the main point of her desire, regardest not what she then asked, that thou mightest make me what she ever asked. The wind blew and swelled our sails, and withdrew the shore from our sight, and she on the morrow was there, frantic with sorrow, and with complaints and groans filled thine ears, who didst then disregard them. Whilst through my desires they wert hurrying me to end all desire, and the earthly part of her affection to me was chastened by the allotted scourge of sorrows. For she loved my being with her, as mothers do, but much more than many, and she knew not how great joy thou wert about to work for her out of my absence. She knew not, therefore did she weep and wail, and by this agony there appeared in her the inheritance of Eve, with sorrow seeking what in sorrow she had brought forth. And yet, after accusing my treachery and hard-heartedness, she betook herself again to intercede to thee for me, and went to her wonted place, and I to Rome. End of Book 5, Chapter 8.